So today we're going to be talking about Led Zeppelin, and these are my favorite albums by Led Zeppelin, ranked from least to most favorite. And we're going to start with the last album that Led Zeppelin released. Led Zeppelin is definitely in my top 3 favorite bands of all time, along with Pink Floyd and probably The Doors. They made an album, actually an album came out rather in 1982. This was 2 years after the band had broken up and the drummer John Bonham had died. And so it was kind of released by the band, but yet more by their record company. And a lot of people consider it to be sort of a compilation album, and it may be, but it really, to me, a compilation album is an album of songs that have already been released by the band, along with maybe a couple of unreleased tracks, but this is totally unreleased tracks. A lot of them are just very mediocre. I mean, if they should have released some of the BBC stuff back in the 70s, it would have been a lot better album. But number 9 is Coda. The Final Offering is really, I mean, to me, it's not necessarily really an offering. I don't consider it an offering because it's not really, you know, it's not an album the band went into the studio and it's like, oh yeah, we're going to make this album, and then they put it out. It's kind of just like a patchwork of old songs thrown together by the studio. I mean, there's a couple of tracks on the album that are good. It's mostly just a very subpar effort, I think, coming from, you know, a band like Led Zeppelin. It's just, it doesn't match up at all to me. I never listen to this album, and I'm a big Led Zeppelin fan. And some of you will, you know, disagree. I mean, some of the songs on the album are decent. Bonzo, let's see, what else? Darlene's kind of a fun little tune. But most of them are just hat grabbers, I mean, honestly. And maybe I'm being a little unfair, but I mean, if you put an album out as a band that has achieved a certain status of creativity and talent, you may not be able to match it. You know, I mean, Pink Floyd had a hard time matching Dark Side of the Moon. The Beatles, I mean, they had a hard time matching Revolver, although, I mean, or Sgt. Pepper. They matched Revolver with Sgt. Pepper, but, I mean, they had a hard time after that. But, I mean, a lot of these bands that come out with a major masterpiece of an album have a hard time repeating. But when you don't even give any effort at all, it's kind of like Pink Floyd and the Endless River. So Coda comes in at number 9. Number 8 is the 1979 album, In Through the Outdoor. This album, it's almost as if the next album that I'm about to mention is tied with this one for number 7 or number 8. Because I almost like both of them the same. As a matter of fact, this album, number 8, In Through the Outdoor, it has more good songs on it than the album that I'm about to mention, but really no great song. It's a very experimental album by Led Zeppelin. They tackled a variety of genres and tunes on this album, but it's and some of it's reminiscent of the old sound. They kind of rehashing it, but I mean, they are Led Zeppelin, so they do what they want, I suppose. But it feels less like outtakes than Coda. It feels less like outtakes than the album that I'm about to mention as well. But it's almost as if they had no creativity left. They just were kind of like, let's do a song like this, or let's do a song in this genre or whatever. I'm sure that's not the way they did it, but it kind of feels that way. It's kind of a weak album to me. But there are some fun songs on there. Hot Dog, Fool in the Rain. There's some really good tracks on the album. In the Evening starts the album. That's a great mood-setting track. I always thought about that song as like a song that I would play if I were driving, if I were filming a movie where it starts out in a car driving through the middle of nowhere and the camera zooms down on the car from like the sky. It's just, I don't know, this thought I had in my head. But and then All of My Love is probably my favorite song off this album. It's a ballad, but I don't know, there's just something strange about it, and I like it. There's a lot of strange sounds on this album, but overall I find it to be a very subpar effort. Way better than Coda, again, which was no effort. So that's number 8, In Through the Outdoor. Number 7, again, this could be interchangeable with In Through the Outdoor, but number 7 is Presence. This album seems thrown together. It sounds more like outtakes, again, than most any album that they release besides Coda. I mean, there's a few solid, strong tunes on there. Nobody's Fault But Mine, Royal Orleans. I mean, there's a few songs. I mean, the album is enjoyable. It's not got a lot of, I guess, songs. In Through the Outdoor has more songs that I enjoy, but this one has actually solid songs, but it's really got one super good song, and this song carries the album completely, and that is Achilles' Last Stand. This is one of my top 10 Zeppelin songs, and it's on this weak album. If this song wasn't on this album, it would not even compare to In Through the Outdoor. It would not even compare. It would be a little bit better than Coda, and there's a wide gap between Coda and In Through the Outdoor. So it's just not a tight sound. I mean, the band is just, I don't know, they seem almost, I guess they were struggling at that time, but they do. I mean, it shows on this album. Again, Achilles' Last Stand is really the only song that I find that I listen to on this album. So again, it's interchangeable with In Through the Outdoor, but number 7, Presence. Number 6 may shock a few people, and really it's tough because these next albums are just so close. It's really hard for me to rank one over the other. But, Led Zeppelin 4 comes in at number 6. Even though it has one of my favorite songs of all time, it's got Stairway to Heaven, which is one of my favorite songs. It's in the top 5 of my favorite Zeppelin songs. It's the song that's played the most. It's the song everyone knows. Stairway to Heaven is, to me, carries this album. I know there's a lot of people that's going to disagree because this album has a lot of radio strong tunes, Black Dog, Rock and Roll, so forth and so on. But Stairway, to me, carries this album. If it didn't have Stairway on it, it would still be better than Presence. So, it'd still probably come in at number 6. Stairway could have lifted it a little bit higher, but there's just, I don't know, it's hard for me to rate it over the albums that I'm about to mention, which are just phenomenal albums. But Led Zeppelin 4, most popular album, most radio-friendly album. I think they should have ended side 2 with Stairway instead of When the Levee Breaks. I think When the Levee Breaks should have ended side 1, but oh well, nothing I can do about that. There's not a lot of weak songs on this album. I mean, it's a classic album for a reason. It's a strong album for a reason, and I just feel that it's overrated a little bit. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's not overrated. It's just maybe I just hear Black Dog and rock and roll so much. I'm just sick of them. And When the Levee Breaks to me is an overrated song. I mean, it's okay. I enjoy it when I hear it, but I don't know. Maybe this one has a lot of, what is it? Familiarity breeds contempt. Maybe that's it. But I mean, this album, they did reach a certain level that surpasses any prior level. They reached the pinnacle of the mountain, and Stairway to Heaven is one of the greatest songs of all time. It is not an overrated song. It is one of the greatest songs of all time, with one of the greatest solos of all time. I could listen to that solo over and over and over and over again. That's how good it is. It is, between that solo and the solo to Comfortably Numb, just utter perfection. I mean, that song's a masterpiece. It's well loved for a reason, because it is that good. The other song that I really like off this album is Going to California. And I like all the songs off the album. It's just, these are my two favorites, Stairway to Heaven and Going to California. So coming in at number 6, Led Zeppelin 4. Coming in at number 5, again, this is probably going to aggravate a few people, but Houses of the Holy, number 5. This album is probably Led Zeppelin's most proggy. A lot of prog elements on this album, which I really enjoy. A lot of variety on this album. There's one song on it I just can't stand. Dayar Maker, or whatever it is, the reggae song. No, don't like that. But again, it has more ballads. It's got some of the hard rockin' Led Zeppelin stuff. Got some of the acoustic rock Led Zeppelin stuff. Just got a good complete package of Zeppelin. It's a very strong album. Definitely in my top 50 albums of all time. And I really hated to rank it low. I mean, so low, because I really do like this album. I really do enjoy it. But Led Zeppelin is one of those bands where even when you have an album that you would consider, this is one of my least favorites, it doesn't matter. It's still a fantastic album. It's still just a classic, venture into rock music. So you can't be, my favorite songs off of this, No Quarter. No Quarter is my number 2 favorite Led Zeppelin song of all time, behind 10 Years Gone. No Quarter it's Zeppelin at its darkest, most prog sounding. You could even call it a gothic song. It's a brilliant song. The Ocean, what a riff. Oh my goodness. That song it just gets stuck in your head. The Rain song, one of the most beautiful ballads I've ever heard, ever. Over the Hills and Far Away, oh my goodness. This whole album is just chock full of great tunes that I hate to rank it so low. Next, coming in at number 4, Led Zeppelin 2. This album is it's a very radio friendly album, like Led Zeppelin 4 was. Whole Lot of Love, Heartbreaker, Livin' Lovin' Maid, which is always played after Heartbreaker, Ramble On, just a host of good songs on this album. It's a classic album for a reason, because it's that good. It's just as hard rocking as the first album, except for it's a bit more psychedelic than the first album. It's just, again, maybe familiarity breeds contempt, but I've heard these songs so much that my ears bleed. I still love them, but it's just like I love to hear music that I don't hear as much. You know, I don't like to hear something where it's just run into the ground. And this radio stations today, classic rock radio stations, just get all over me. I mean, get under my skin because they play the same 200 songs, and it's very annoying. But again, it's I call it their first hippie album because it's got songs like What Is and What Should Never Be and Ramble On, and it's very psychedelic. I mean, parts of Whole Lot of Love break down into this sort of spacey, weird psych atmosphere, I suppose. But you know, it's very similar to the first album. It's just not as dark as the first album, not as gritty, I suppose. But it's probably better than Led Zeppelin 1, to be honest. It's just I tend to listen to Led Zeppelin 1 a little bit more because this album played so much on the radio. So, but my favorite songs off of it, Ramble On, love that song. What Is and What Should Never Be is probably my favorite song off the album. Yeah, I mean, it's really a good album. I believe Thank You is off this album as well, and it's one of my favorite songs as well. But that's coming in at number 4, Led Zeppelin 2. Coming in at number 3, Led Zeppelin 1. Again, this is the debut album. It's mostly blues rock and some old covers, you know, being the first album, but it just punches you in the face immediately with Good Times, Bad Times. I mean, this was the first Led Zeppelin album I ever bought. I'll never forget it. I was driving a 1984 or 5 Camaro, put it in the cassette player, and dun 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 dun. I mean, it was just immediately I fell in love with it. You know, punching, aggressive stuff, I loved it. And then there are the darker tunes on the album, Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You, and Dazed and Confused. Oh, wow, Dazed and Confused. I mean, again, one of my favorite Led Zeppelin songs. I love the breakdown in Dazed and Confused. I love when Jimmy Page uses the bow. Oh my goodness. That's a psychedelic masterpiece. But this album, I don't know, just the explosiveness of it all and the way they came out. It's a total classic album. Maybe not as good as Led Zeppelin 2, but to me, it's the one that I pick up and listen to more. So, you know, and even the song like Your Time Is Gonna Come is kind of a precursor to what Led Zeppelin would become. That song could fit on, it could fit on Led Zeppelin 2. It could fit on Houses of the Holy. I mean, it could fit on any. It was more of a progressive style of Led Zeppelin, not prog necessarily, but the step in, hey, this is what we're going to become. But again, my favorite songs off this album: Good Times, Bad Times, Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You, Dazed and Confused, Black Mountain, Your Time. I mean, it's full of great songs. And so it's going to come in at number 3, Led Zeppelin debut album. Number 2, Led Zeppelin 3. Now, a lot of people don't rank this album as high as Led Zeppelin 1 or Led Zeppelin 2. They sure don't rank it as high as Houses of the Holy or Led Zeppelin 4 at all. I mean, this album don't get a lot of love, actually, because it's mostly an acoustic-based album, a lot of folky-type songs on it. Although it does begin with Immigrant Song, which is probably Led Zeppelin's heaviest song ever. Maybe they got to the point of Achilles' Last Stand, but I mean, this song is like, it will absolutely just smash you right in the face, Immigrant Song. So, I mean, for this album to start that way, you think, man, this album's going to rock your face off. And it really is just, it turns into this sort of acoustic, folky type little album. Although it does have like a real classic blues, the Since I've Been Loving You. And it also has my favorite song off the album, which is Out on the Tiles. You don't hear a lot about that song, but it's just a great rocking song. I mean, it is Led Zeppelin, you know, it's that type of song. But most of the album is very flower, hippie, ballads. I call it Led Zeppelin's kind of Woodstock album, except for like Immigrant Song and Out on the Tiles. Obviously, they're outliers when it comes to this album. But it's an album that I purchased thinking, you know, after I purchased the first album, I'm thinking, man, Led Zeppelin's going to rock my face off, especially after I heard Immigrant Song. And I was kind of disappointed when I first heard this album, because I was like, this is kind of bland and kind of, I don't know. It was a weak effort is what I was thinking, but the more I listened to it, the more I loved it. And it became just an album where I never skipped a song on it. I liked them all. My favorite songs off of it, though, if I had to choose, would be Friends, Gallows Pole, Branya or Stomp. Don't know if I'm pronouncing that correct, don't care. Immigrant Song and Out on the Tiles. Out on the Tiles being my favorite song. But again, this song has Tangerine. I mean, there's just so many good tracks off this album. Can't remember them all right off the bat. But yeah, I don't skip a song on this album. I mean, to me, this album is, if not for the next album, would be my favorite Led Zeppelin album. So coming in at number 2, Led Zeppelin 3. Number 1, and I'm sure those of you who know Led Zeppelin already know what it's going to be. Number 1, Physical Graffiti. The greatest Led Zeppelin album, in my opinion, ever made. It has the most variety of any Led Zeppelin album. It, to me, sums up Led Zeppelin because it has some of the greatest songs ever written. If Stairway to Heaven would have been on this album, the rest of the albums there would have been a wide gap between this album and the rest of the albums if Stairway had been on this album. But it was not. But Physical Graffiti is the album with the most enjoyable songs for me. It is a double album, so it has a lot of songs, and not all of them I enjoy or I listen to, but most of them I do. And on a double album, that's saying something, really. I mean, that's really talking about how great the album is. If you can make a double album where people skip maybe one song, maybe two, but mostly listen to the whole thing and enjoy it, you've accomplished quite a feat, I think. And they did so with this. This is a masterpiece. My favorite Led Zeppelin album of all time. It is my second favorite album of all time, behind Animals by Pink Floyd. And what's so crazy about this album is it is a double album of old outtakes and unfinished songs. It's just kind of like they were like, let's put this together. And they did, and it was, oh my goodness. I mean, this album is just unparalleled. It's just incredible. If I was on a desert island and I had to choose 5 albums, this would be one of those 5. there's just no other word. I mean, no other words to describe it other than it is the quintessential Led Zeppelin album. It covers everything in Led Zeppelin's career, all in one album. Every style, except for that terrible journey into reggae that they did on House of the Holy. But anyways, my favorite songs off this one: 10 Years Gone, my favorite Led Zeppelin song of all time, In the Light, Down by the Seaside, Kashmir, which is probably one of their most popular off this album, In My Time of Dying, just so many, too many to name. I mean, this is just an incredible album. Just there is a reason this is my favorite Led Zeppelin album. Go listen to it, and you'll find out why. Number one, Physical Graffiti. Well, thank you for joining me for my favorite Led Zeppelin albums. Haven't made my mind up what's going to be next. Could just be a list of some sort, or it could be another band's discography that I do. We'll see. But again, thank you for joining me for Led Zeppelin. Rock on.